to 30-Minute Reviews. I am Adam. Let's see, what is today? Today is Wednesday, the 31st of August, 2022. This year is just trucking along, isn't it? We're here, of course, to talk, well, I mean, of course, like, I don't know if it's an of course thing, but we're here to talk about Moviehouse, which is a great video game. What the fuck is going on here? It's a great video game where it's kind of like Game Dev Tycoon. The demo came out yesterday. Not yesterday, it came out last week during Gamescom and the Gamescom event on Steam, where they put up a bunch of demos for new indie games coming out, and Moviehouse was one of these new games. And Moviehouse is, it's basically Game Dev Tycoon, but instead of running an independent game publisher or independent game developer, you are an independent filmmaker. And on the technical side of this game, and in terms of things I hope they improve before the final launch of the full build, I would like to see I would like to see better catering of the topics for the scripts into the actual implementation of making the script. So, like, when you do it, much like in Game Dev Tycoon, you pick your genre when you begin. Then you get into the meat and potatoes, where you have to pick the story arc. You pick the protagonist, the antagonist, and the setting. And so it's like, let's say I pick comedy, or no, not comedy. What's a good one that will juxtapose with what's going on? And keeping in mind, you start in the 1980s and then move to the future, much like Game Dev Tycoon. And in the demo, you can only play the first 5 years. So let's say we're starting in the beginning, and we're doing I had one when I was getting dressed today. I was like, I want to find an example of where this would, fail, and why the system doesn't work. Oh, okay. So let's say you pick comedy. Okay, they'll give you a bunch of options. You get 4 options for setting, and you'll get like a mansion, a deserted island, an alien spaceship, a school, and then you pick that, and then you go to the next thing, which is your protagonist. And the protagonist will a lot of times not have anything to do with the setting you've picked. So, like, let's say I picked, like, we're doing a comedy, and I picked alien spaceship as a setting. It'll be like a coworker, your boss, or it's like the boss, a schoolmate, and it's like, well, what? Like, these things can be better tied together, I think. It needs to be more branching and less pick from this list 4 at random and then hope for the best. Because that's what it is right now, it seems like, where it's like we have this giant list of possible settings, characters, and protagonists and antagonists. We just have to pick the best and move on. I've also found there's not too much of a difference between using more development time versus the average development time. But I'm sure that using the lower development time will almost certainly result in a worse movie. I didn't try that, though. And the system for making props is too random. That's the other thing. But really, what I wanted to point out is the difference that looking at these two games side by side, because by and large, it's basically a very similar gameplay loop between the two. You have you in this one you hire a writer. Your writer writes a script. Script goes to the director. Director makes a movie. You have to then sell the movie to make profit. In Game Dev Tycoon, you make a game gets sold, you make profit. And there's right after you release it, there's a rating system so you can see how well you did, and you get some insights as to what meshes well with what. Now, I feel like Game Dev Tycoon, and granted, Game Dev Tycoon has been out for like a decade at this point, and this game comes out late this year, early next year. I mean, we're comparing kind of apples and oranges here, because one's had a considerable amount of time to work out the kinks, the other is still in development, and we're playing an early demo for this game. But I feel like the research system in Game Dev Tycoon is a lot better implemented, and the speed at which you get research points is better scaled to what value the research points have. And I think that's a problem with this one. But I think the big thing for me is looking at how different these two games play in terms of how it handles finances. Because here's the thing, you start out in Game Dev Tycoon, you can do PC or Commodore 64. You can make the game, it's very rudimentary. You have very little upfront cost besides whatever cost it is to have that space. I think you're in a garage in the first level. That's all well and good. And it's just you. You're not cutting yourself a salary out of that, it's you are the person there. And you have that space, and you're doing that, and it's, you're making your game and you're putting it out for sale, and it is, largely you. And it's like, now look, it's meant to be the 80s, so it's more doable in the 80s to have a one-man development team. I think now if you had a one-man development team, it probably wouldn't work, as evidenced by this game, which this game does show the pitfall of the, as you go forward and forward into the future, you end up with these larger and larger development teams as you develop medium and large and AAA titles. The difference is, out of the gate for Moviehouse, you have to hire people. You can't work alone, and that is indicative of making movies. You cannot work alone. If someone wants to, they can sit down and make a game by themselves, and maybe we'll have one of those in the near future coming from this podcast. Maybe I started work on something last night, but that's a ways away. But point is, it takes, it does take a bit to get the movie going. And then on top of that, it is the cost of getting the movie out. The gatekeepers to the industry still exist in this game, where it's like, all right, you made a movie, great, now what? And you can't self-distribute because you're a small independent studio. You can't do that. You have to go to one of these, you have to go to a distributor. And to do that, you can either pay $25,000 to go to a distributor, or you can pay $5,000 and enter into a film festival and hope for the best. And either way, I mean, it's not really $5,000 in real life to enter a film festival, but it is, an expensive thing depending on, how big your budget is for your movie. So, what I'm trying to say is, I think that this game unintentionally does highlight a lot of the barriers that independent filmmakers will hit trying to make it into the industry, and a lot of those barriers are financial, because it's not cheap. And if you're someone who can afford to make a movie, then good for you, and go out and do it. But it is not cheap to hire a director of photography. It's not cheap to hire an editor who can edit it for you. And if you can do all of that yourself, then great for you. It is not an easy thing to be able to write, direct, star in, and edit your own movie. So it's one of those things that when you play this game and you see just how much goes into it, and all of that, I feel like there's definitely, it's definitely saying something about the industry. And then on top of that, too, you have to pay the $25,000 to meet with distributors. Like, let's say you don't want to go to the film festival route, or you made your first movie, the film festival just happened, and then you are a year away from the next one, because the other festivals, for whatever reason in this demo, are locked. There's only one festival you can enter. Maybe they need to be larger scale movies and not shorts. But whatever. So you go and you have to do that. You can pay the $25,000, or you sit on all these movies that are being made and are done, and they're just never being released, and they're sitting in a vault somewhere hoping for a tax write-off. I feel like that's not like that is a bigger problem that I have with this. What's it called with this game is that the cost each time, and the thing is too, it's like it looks like you're spending a lot up front, and to be fair, no, but you only pay for the dev kit once. Like if I develop, like if I'm playing Game Dev Tycoon and I develop an NES game or whatever they call the NES in that, like if I develop that, I don't have to pay each time I make a game for a new NES. What's it called? A new NES. There is a slight there is a fee each time, but you at least get the option of determining how much you're going to pay by picking which system you're going to develop for. Because if you want to conserve your money, you can develop for PC. Because I think PC is a $5,000 startup cost, and then if you go to like the bigger consoles, you're paying 50, 60, 35. Like even the Commodore 64 is 35, and it's just one of those things where it's like I would like to see this get better handled. Where it's like the idea of paying the 35 and then getting two options for a distributor and being like, well, which one are we going to take to see the money? That would have been the better way to implement that system, I feel like. Where it's like, I think if you like seek distributors and you have your movie done, I feel like if you do that, you're probably better off like, okay, so movie's done, here is what we're doing. I don't know. I feel like that is a easier method, if you ask me. And it's like, and then on top of that, you get other options. And look, I totally understand. But the thing is, I'm only in the 80s, and you can't get past the 80s. So maybe in future updates, you'll get to a point where there are more festivals and there are more things like that. I would just like for this game, if that's going to be the case, where you get to modern day, there are 80 zillion festivals you can enter into, some of which are reputable, some of which are less so. And if that's the case, I would like to see a delineation almost between like the ability to say I want to start here instead of starting back in the 80s. And also, I would like to see research points be used in the same way and development. In Game Dev Tycoon, they have the ability to create the engine. I would rather have that game, me be able to found my own departments for better things. Like, let me put research points into special effects stuff or marketing stuff or distribution stuff, and then when I build a new department, I spend a good amount of money to build a new department, and then put in all of these things into it. Where it's like, let's say that I'm to research, like everything that you have to spend research points in the beginning should kind of just be there as built in from the beginning. These are gameplay systems that are important. You shouldn't have to waste your first 4 points on key gameplay aspects like controlling fan bases and hiring staff and things like that. That shouldn't be the first 4 research points, especially when you only get at most 1 research point per level, per movie you make. It should be, it should be other things that you're researching. And maybe that is the case in later in the game, and just for the demo they made it this way, so that way you feel like you're doing more. I just feel like there are better options for what they did, if this is the way it's going to be in the final build of the game. That said, the game's pretty fun. I mean, it would be cool to have more than the first 5 years, but again, this is just a demo. But yeah, I would definitely improve the research system, and improve the system for picking and choosing what's in your movie, and making it clear how much of an impact that actually has, and all of that. Like, that is, like, and they put trivia questions in the game about how filmmaking works, which I thought was a nice touch, where it's like, toward the end of production, you'll get a random event that's like, we forgot how to do a tracking shot. Which of these pieces of equipment will we use to do a tracking shot? And it's like, oh, okay, so you pick the one that's right. But there's no clear delineation of what that causes if you do it correct. And again, the other problem is, much like Game Dev Tycoon, they're trying to quantify what is the epitome of unquantifiable. Like, filmmaking and art in general is a subjective medium. So the idea of saying we're going to prioritize character in this thing, it's like, when you look at some of the best comedies of all time, like, character is a priority. If you look at, and effects, not so much. Like, if you, like, sometimes effects can be worse to comedic effect. And it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like, we're going to get to a point where it's like, what's the most important thing in the comedy? I should just max out character and then put the other two to 0, but I feel like that's the wrong choice for the sake of the game, because it's going with a very market-driven idea. And honestly, I think the problem is, too, that it's not even specifically comedy. It is everything. Like, there is no scenario, like, looking at, broadly what's going on here, like, looking at, when you're making a movie, there is no scenario possible where you're making a movie and character should not be one of the top most important aspects of executing said story. Like, there is no scenario. Like, the fact that character is one of the things does kind of rub me the wrong way, because character is not an ancillary thing that that is not important or important depending on what the movie is. It is, character will always drive. Character will always have a way in for the audience. And I think that like, saying that, like, okay, we're making a science fiction movie, so character is less important here, that's just strictly not the case. Like, if we look at some of the best science fiction of all time, it's all character driven. And it's all, we care about this person and we care about what happens to them, even if they're not human. And I feel like that's a kind of pitfall that could happen. And again, I feel like, not having the ability to build, like, build, like, better visual, like, the prop system is not great either. And I feel like that's another misfire. That should be worked into a visual effects department that has broader work assigned to it. Not just, this is us doing, not just like, we're going to build a prop, pick 3 adjectives, and we're going to spit out a prop and hope it fits with, whatever movie you're going to make next. Otherwise, you're going to sit there, bing, 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 hope for the best, bing, 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 hope for the best. And it's like, all right, well, I need a prop for this, and I keep putting in the combination, and you keep giving me nonsense that doesn't really fit. Like, it is a kind of weird thing. Like, look at, like, how they did graphics, where it's like, 2D graphics V1, 2D graphics V2, 2D graphics V3, and Game Dev Tycoon. Do that for visual effects, where it's like miniature scale modeling, and then it's like you go to computer generated, and you, like, that kind of thing would work. Like, that system does still work in this, in this game, in this movie. And then what you can do is you can weigh it, where it's like, okay, well, while they're doing that, that's going to take X amount of time to build and to set up. So while that's happening, you can't do, you can't use your visual effects department. You are, you have to do, you can do, like, like, dramas and stuff that will not use visual effects nearly as much, But, you know, that would be a good way to weigh it out, I think, and make it fit a little bit better. But that's all the time we have for today. Moviehouse does look pretty cool, and I hope it is going to improve as time goes on, and let's see what happens. But until then, have a great rest of your week.